Todd, you're up next. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. How's it going?
Okay, great. Great. How are you doing?
Pretty good, man. You got a question about collusion, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm in Quebec, Canada,
Okay.
playing 1-2,
Yep.
and there are two players at the table I've identified as colluding.
Okay. And why do you identify them as colluding?
They're betting patterns. I can explain further.
So, is this in Hold'em, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. Because I will say that it's much, much harder to collude in Hold'em than like if you're playing, PLO or five card PLO or something like that. I also I find it amusing that you're calling from Quebec, which is probably one of the, if not the only place in North America where you're probably allowed to speak two languages at the table. And some people might not know French, right?
Right. They
Yeah.
actually, it happens all the time. I'll be in a hand and the dealer will speak French to a player in the hand, and I'll have to ask, and they're kind of offended to have to say it in English. You
Well,
know?
that's just those French Canadians. No offense,
Yeah.
but people from Quebec. Okay, so why do you think these guys are colluding?
So I'm sitting in seat five. Villain number one is sitting seat six, and villain two is sitting in seat eight. When the button is on villain one in seat six is when it happened. This happened three times in 3 hours. What happens is we'll get $10 bets around for three players in front of me. I call. The villain number one beside me on the button calls. Villain number two in the big blind raises to 55, gets a couple callers. I call and another guy called. Then the villain number one on the button raises to 120. He just smooth called the 10 earlier, and now he raises to 120, and the other fellow jams his $800 stack.
So do you think that it's okay? I'm going to just try to explain this. Do you think it's two or three people that are colluding?
Two.
All right, two. So what you're saying is that, and maybe you've seen this before. So you think two people are working together by the second guy back raising a lot. And what I mean by back raising a lot is calling a bet and then raising a raise, right? So player A
Right.
bets, player B calls, player C raises, player A calls, then player B re-raises. That's a back raise. When I say back raise, it's a raise of a raise after calling on the flop. Okay. So this happened several times.
Yeah, three times in 3 hours.
That is pretty rare. That is pretty rare because I can count the number of times I might see back raises on one hand. So what else are they? Are they talking to each other in a different language?
They're both I think they're Middle Eastern. I can
Okay.
only guess. I'm not an expert on languages, but I think they're speaking Arabic, but they kind of acting like they don't know one another, but they'll say like 4 or 5 word sentences in between hands, and nobody knows. So they speak fluent English.
Okay.
So obviously they're speaking their language to say something they don't want us to know. What I'm concluding is they've capped the caller's range. The $255 guys that called are capped.
Mm-hmm.
They can't call the $800 bet unless they're jacks plus ace king,
Right.
or they would have already raised, right?
So let's talk about a couple things here. So obviously there's something going. You think that there's something going on with the fact that it's very, very odd that these guys have back raised people out of the hand, which is a rare play in poker, and then all of a sudden they're speaking in a different language at the table. Now, a couple things on this. Just because people speak other languages at the table when they're not involved with the hands does not mean that they're colluding. And I kind of feel like this is something where people, I'm not saying you, but people at the lower stakes get more angry and more pissed off when people speak other languages at the table way more than people at the higher stakes. And I've got some empirical evidence of this. I'll tell you, when you saw the Omaha game at Hustler Casino Live, or they did a short deck game, when you watch high stakes poker, especially dealing with guys who are Asian or like Hustler Casino Live Chinese, I have never, ever heard one person like a Tom Dwan or whoever that's playing high stakes get mad at Charles, just one example, or somebody else when they speak Chinese in between the hands. Now, obviously, it's on the live stream. I mean, but the point is that like a lot of guys, for whatever reason, I've noticed it with Chinese guys, they'll speak Chinese like in between the hand. It doesn't mean that they're colluding. And the higher stakes that you play, like the more you realize it's just part of the game. It's part of live poker. And a lot of times these guys are fish, not all of them. So why, like, what's the big deal? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the point that I'm saying,
I 100% agree with you.
no, and I get that, and I'm not saying that. I just want to address that one thing. I'll tell you what I would do in your situation, but I've seen people where it's very, very obvious, whether because the opponents are fish or whatever, that these guys are not talking about the hand, where they're trying to get the guy in whatever language they're talking about at 2-5 or 5-10 in between hand. English only at the table, blah, 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 you know, and it's just like, oh God, it kind of reminds me of like guys that like call like string raises and this, you know, the whole stupid thing with, you know, turning your hand over when someone says you're good. It's just like one of those things where usually the higher stakes that you play, where there's a lot of businessmen at the table, you take a look at the guys that are playing for profit. If it's not bothering them, it's usually not an issue, and there's sort of a reason why. You know what I'm saying? Now, so that's just one thing. And I have a lot of experience with this in LA. I mean, it was a melting pot. You've got Chinese, Koreans, Spanish going on with Hispanics, Mexicans. You've got Russian people, got a lot of Israelis. They're all speaking all different kinds of languages, right? I mean, even to the point where, like, I mean, the only time it might bother I would ever get into a situation with would be if somehow, like, if one guy was in the hand with me, and then one of the other guys, like in a big decision, said something to the other guy who was not in the hand in that language. That doesn't really happen. It's more of away from the hand. It's more of when they're not when they're not in the hand, right? Or when something maybe during the hand, but like they're folding, like it's not really affecting anything. So people get a little bit, you know, they get really wound up over that, which is over nothing. Now, in your case, it seems like you have something where it's like, I would go to the floor. I would go to the management and I would say, well, you know, I think there's something weird going on. You could just go and explain it to them. Like, these guys have like back raised like three times. It's not even the language thing. It's more of the play here that's more, I think, suspect of collusion.
It's a language to identify they were associated. I didn't, nothing more than that. I didn't care what they were saying. You know, it was just that just told me they knew one another.
Right. Okay. So it's not even a language issue. It's more of the fact that they're back raising, right?
Right. So I didn't tell you about the third time. So I'm on to them now, right? So the first two times, King Jack suited, I folded. I had nines and folded. And then the third time I had ace 10 offsuit. And again, he rammed a stack in. I was going to go off on both of them right at that time, and I bit my tongue. I stopped for a minute, and I decided, hey, maybe my ace 10 off is good. You know, if they're doing this, maybe, you know, clearly they aren't doing this with the nut.
Did he back raise you pre-flop again?
The same scenario.
Just get it in.
His friend to my left raised, and then he jammed a stack, and I called him off with 300, with my final 300.
Yeah.
And with ace 10 off, he had king 3, and he flopped trip threes.
So, well, I mean, I actually think that's even. You said your name was Tom?
Todd.
That even is more like of a thing that I would take to management as an example. The guy that back raised had king 3 off?
Yeah.
Is that right? So, I mean, so I don't know if these guys are still around. This has got, I wanted to go on that language rant for some time about people speaking other languages. So, you know, because I think it should be said, that tends to be overblown. But you have a situation where if you are conveying the story correctly, just the sheer fact that these guys are playing in that manner seems to make it obvious that they're colluding. And I would go to the management with this hand and say, I was suspecting that these guys are back raised colluding, and he had king 3 off here. And like, these guys are colluding. Ask some other people. Now, did you go to management and try to say, like, I think these guys are colluding against the table?
Well, I
or to
went
the
home
floor?
and thought about it, and I thought, maybe you know circumstantial evidence is, and they'll say, well, you don't have any smoking gun, and then I'll just be a. I thought about different solutions, and I thought maybe a better one would be to find them when they're playing again and just stack them and
Well,
trap
that's
them.
what some of these people in the live chat are saying. Why don't you just play with them and you know what they're up to? You know what I
Right.
mean? Yeah. And you can trap them.
Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe that's the best solution to this.
Well, I mean, that would probably work. Are these guys regulars, or were they just in town, or what?
I hadn't seen them before, but I haven't been playing there very long, so I don't know all the regulars, but
Here. I mean, we'll just wrap this up. Here's my take. If it's bother, I think what your solution there, like if you don't think these guys are too smart, might be the best approach. Is like maybe no one else knows what's going on, but you do, and a lot of these guys, someone's trying to cheat at 1-2, they're not doing it well. Now, there was a case of cheating recently. I know this PLO thing in Florida where two guys were like working together and they were arrested. It was a question of, I don't think it had anything to do with poker. They were trying to cheat they were cheating in poker, but they were also cheating in the table games too. And they got them. I don't remember where that was at. So cheating in live poker happens. It's just much, much rarer, especially in a 2-card game live. Because it just becomes fairly obvious, like you were saying. But you can take it to the floor and say that these guys are cheating, or you can try to beat them. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's up to you. It seems like you have got maybe trying to take them knowing what they're doing. It might be the best approach. Now, is that fair to the other players? I don't know. But I would just say that in this particular case, you have a strong sense. I think that when people think other people are colluding, it tends to be way overblown, whether it's a language thing or not. But it seems to me, like I said, if you're conveying this story, the sheer fact that these guys have back raced multiple times and then you caught them with some bullshit like King 3 off, it's a pretty strong case that they're trying to do something. Maybe they're not smart about it. Maybe they're trying to do it, but they're going to lose money in the long run. That's one of the other old things too, is like, some of these guys, the old rounders like Chip Reese, Doyle, like they used to know when guys were trying to cheat them, but they were so bad at cheating, they were going to win anyways. And sometimes they would know how they were getting cheated. So it
right.
was even worse for the guys.
I was
But,
thinking about that. It wouldn't end well back in the day if you were doing stuff like that in a underground game.
well, I think the sharp guys would just be on to them and know how to exploit them from cheat, as opposed to like taking them out back. It's all about money,
Right.
right?
The last hand I mucked my hand without showing them, so they know I didn't call with ace 10 off. They may have thought I had a better hand, so I'm hoping to meet them again.
Well, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. All
Great.
right.
Okay.
All right, Dub.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Take it easy.